There's something about British women writers, especially those writing in the mid-20th century, that I find completely irresistible. Something about their voice, their wit, and the way they captured everyday life with such charm and intelligence. Today I'm sharing 8 writers who have become like friends to me, those that I return to again and again, whose catalogs I have deeply explored. This is part 1 of a 2-part series, and I can't wait to introduce you to all these wonderful writers. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome back to my reading life. And if you are a returning viewer here, it should come as no surprise to you that I am a huge fan of British women writers, especially those writing from the early to mid part of the 20th century. And I thought it would be fun to share with you, first off in this video, some of my favorites, and then be sure to stay tuned because I'm going to be coming back and sharing even more British women writers that I'm currently exploring. So grab yourself a cuppa and let us get into some of the British women writers who feel like old friends to me. Now, I haven't necessarily read everything these women have written, but I feel like I've read enough that I have a good grasp of them and their writing styles, and I really enjoy their books, and they are authors that I return to whenever I'm in the need for something that I can rely on to be a good thumping read. This first author is actually one that I think might be a bit more of an acquired taste. She isn't for everyone, so please keep that in mind if you decide to check her out. But the author I am referring to is Barbara Pym. This is Jane and Prudence by her. This was actually the first book of hers that I ever read, and I really enjoyed it. I will say that Barbara Pym's novels tend to have an underlying feeling of melancholy. There might be a bit more sadness to them. So do bear that in mind when you're going into them. So they will have a slightly darker tone than some of these other authors that I'm going to be sharing in this video. But I think Barbara Pym is a really insightful writer, and I think she really gets at the heart of particularly women's lives at the time that she was writing about, and really kind of shows you their interior lives and also how they were treated by society, especially single women, or spinsters as they were called. But I have read 4 Barbara Pym novels so far. So I have read Jane and Prudence, Excellent Women, A Few Green Leaves, my poor edition of this, I don't know what happened to that, and Crampton Hodnet. Those are the 4 Barbara Pym novels that I have read and loved, and I am looking forward to continuing my journey through exploring her books. Again, I think she's one of those authors you kind of need to be in the right mood for, but when I am, I just find myself sinking into the world that she creates. And if you don't mind a little bit more bite in your books, then definitely give Barbara Pym a read. Next up is an author who is a bit of the flip side of Barbara Pym in that she is very light, very fresh, very witty, though Barbara Pym is witty in her own way. But this author just is such pure delight and escapism to read. And though I have only read 4 of her books so far, and I maybe can't speak to whether some of her other books go a little bit deeper and darker, but this particular series is just joyful escapism, and that is E.M. Delafield. This is the Diary of a Provincial Lady, and I have a bind up here of the first 4 books in the series, and I've read them all. Love them. These are written in epistolary format, and we are just following the provincial lady, she is never named, and her diaries throughout the courses of a number of years. And she's very funny. They're very domestic. You just get insights into her life as a wife and a mother and what she gets up to on a day-to-day basis, or doesn't get up to, as the case may be. But if you have never read this, or if you're looking for a place to start with books that fall under that furrowed middlebrow category, those books written by women in the early to mid 20th century that were not considered highbrow literature, but just are really wonderful stories. I think The Diary of a Provincial Lady is a great place to start if you're interested in diving into those types of authors. So definitely give this one a read if you haven't yet. It is wonderful. And each individual book in the series is not that long. Like I said, this is a bind up of all 4. So you can take your time with this one. That is what I did. And it's one that you can just pick up, dive into, get a little bit of a giggle out of it, and then set it down and come back to it again when you are in the mood for it. But I love this, and I'm looking forward again to exploring more of E.M. Delafield's work. Tell me what I should read next by her. And next up is an author who's actually kind of a bit of an outlier in this video because she was really writing more towards the end of the 20th century, but I just love her so much, and she's so very funny, and she fit just very well, especially into this first few authors that I was sharing about, that I couldn't not include her. And that is Sue Townsend. And this book is The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4. This is the first book in her Adrian Mole series about a young boy. It is diary entries of his life and from his perspective, and they're laugh out loud funny. They will take you right back to your teen years if you're interested in living vicariously through this young boy and his adventures. And then the series goes on and follows him throughout the early part, and I think maybe even mid part of his adulthood. I haven't finished reading the series yet, but I have a number of the other books on my shelf. But I still have my first 2 books that my mom gave to me when I was in high school, and I read these back to back, just binged them, loved them, thought they were so, so funny, though I think I will find them maybe even more humorous now that I am on the far side of my teen years. And another book by her that I actually read not too long ago and really, really loved was The Queen and I. And this is an alternate reality where the British royal family has to go on the dole. So they are kicked out of the palace. They're sort of revoked of all of their status as the monarchy, and they have to go and live like regular people. And this is set during the 1980s when Prince Charles and Princess Diana were still married and the boys were still very young. So it's that time period. I'm not even a huge follower of the royal family, and I found this so incredibly funny and just such an interesting take on how the different personalities would react to this situation. So if that's something that appeals to you, definitely give this one a read as well. But Sue Townsend, she is hilarious. I just find her writing, again, it's just very easy to sink into and to get wrapped up in her world and just escape from reality, which sometimes that's what we need, right? You know, now that I'm looking at my list, I actually have a number of authors on here who really were writing at the end of the 20th century, and one of them even into the 21st century. So yeah, we're running the gamut of probably a century's worth almost of writing from these women. But next up is another author who falls into the late 20th century writers, and she is one of my absolute favorite authors of all time, and that is Mary Stewart. I pulled off a few of my vintage copies of her books that I first purchased back in the early 1990s and have kept on my shelf. I have also a big collection of her books here, the hotter editions that came out not too long ago. I think I've collected almost all of them. Very excited about that. Love those editions. They're much easier for me to read now than these small mass market paperbacks, but I have 2 of my favorite of her books here, The Moon Spinners and 9 Coaches Waiting. She writes romantic suspense novels, often set in very exotic locations. She traveled a lot throughout her life, and so she wrote of the places that she visited and traveled to. And you can definitely tell her descriptions are, they're just fantastic. And again, her pacing and her plots in her books are so well done, and the way she writes her denouements, I cannot say enough. I don't know why they haven't made more of her books into movies, because they feel very cinematic when you're reading them. So really, really wonderful. She also has a series of books about Merlin and King Arthur, and I have read all of those as well, and I highly recommend them. Well, I take that back. I think I may have missed the last one in that series, but I read the first 4, and they are also wonderful. So if you enjoy the King Arthur mythology, then definitely read Mary Stewart's take on that, because they're so immersive and absolutely fabulous. But her romantic suspense novels are truly where my heart lies these days, and I have read and reread them and will probably continue to do so for the rest of my life. She's wonderful. Another author that I will continue to read for the rest of my life, and she should come as no surprise at all to anyone, because we're all, those of you who are following along with me, currently reading one of her books, one of my favorites of hers, and that author is, of course, Rosamunde Pilcher. I have one of her short story collections here, Flowers in the Rain and Other Stories, but of course, she's probably most well known for The Shell Seekers, which is, again, another of my favorite books of hers. She has 4 main big chunky novels, The Shell Seekers, Coming Home, September, and Winter Solstice. They are all wonderful, and you really can't go wrong with any of them. I also think she's a wonderful short story writer. Flowers in the Rain is an excellent collection. The Blue Bedroom is another wonderful collection. She has quite a few shorter novels as well that she has written, and I have read all, but I think about 3 of them now. 2 or 3, I think, is all I have left to read at this point. And I'm very looking forward to finally finishing out and completing her catalog of writings. And then I will have to continue on in my journey of rereading her, because she's so delightful, and she's one of those authors that, again, it's pure escapism. You just can't go wrong with her. And if you've never tried her before, well, at the end of this video, I'm going to give you recommendations for where to start with all of these authors, so stay tuned for that. But again, her big books are probably the best place to start. Next up is the author that I always recommend anytime anyone asks me for a read-alike for Rosamunde Pilcher, and that is Marcia Willett. I think she is probably the closest you can get to Rosamunde Pilcher's writing style. She doesn't always hit the mark, but Rosamunde Pilcher doesn't always hit the mark either. So even a not great Rosamunde Pilcher or Marcia Willett book is often better than a lot of other things I have tried to read. So I highly recommend her. And this book, Looking Forward, is the first book in the Chadwick family series, and one of my favorite family sagas of all time is the Chadwick family. I just love them. I cannot get enough of them, and they are absolutely wonderful. But Marcia Willett has lots and lots of standalone novels as well. And she has a lot of seasonal books as well, it feels like. So whether you're looking for something set in the summer or the spring or the winter, I think you really can't go wrong with her titles. You can look for one that sounds good to you, that's maybe set seasonally, if that's something that interests you. But really, you can just pick up any of her books and dive in, though the Chadwick family is definitely one of my very favorites, and I'm excited to keep on reading her. I still have quite a few more of her books to read, even though I've read quite a few already. But yes, she's a wonderful writer, and again, a wonderful read-alike for Rosamunde Pilcher if that's something you're looking for. And I mentioned that the Chadwick family is one of my very favorite family sagas, but this next family saga is right up there alongside it, and that is the saga by Elizabeth Jane Howard about the Cazalet family. And there are 5 books in this series. This is the first book, The Light Years, and I have read the entire series. It is amazing, and it is so immersive, and you will just get sucked into this family through all of their dramas and ups and downs. But if you enjoy family saga novels or series and you haven't read Elizabeth Jane Howard, I think she is such a prime example of that type of book, and she does it so incredibly well. And I haven't read anything else by Elizabeth Jane Howard, though I have another one of her books, The Long View, sitting on my shelf to read, which I've heard wonderful things about, and I can't wait to get to it. But I absolutely love this series, and I don't think you can go wrong if you are a fan of family sagas by picking up Elizabeth Jane Howard. She's a wonderful writer. And the final writer that I'm going to share in today's video is one that I have just discovered really within the past 3 or 4 years, but she has become a lifetime favorite of mine, and I have plans to read everything that she has written that is in print that I can get my hands on. And that author, of course, is D.E. Stevenson. This is Miss Bunkle's book, which was the very first book of hers that I read. And it has been such a joyous journey through her world ever since. And I can't stop reading her. I want to be reading her almost all of the time, even though I don't do that. She is so wonderful about domestic details, about family life, about the interior lives of her characters, and I just get completely swept away with her books. Even though none of them are particularly long, you just feel completely drawn into her world. I know I keep saying that with all of these books, but that's why I love them. It's because they draw me in and make me want to live in this world they've created. And I think D.E. Stevenson is a wonderful example of that time period in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. I think she maybe even wrote into the 60s as well. And she just captures that time so beautifully, and especially looking at women's lives and the lives of wives and mothers and single women and daughters and grandmothers and everything in between. And her books have romance and domestic life and village life and beautiful descriptions, especially of Scotland. And I can't get enough of her. I really, really can't. And if you can't get enough of her, or you want to learn more about her, I actually have an author spotlight video, which is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks, all about D.E. Stevenson. So if you want to learn more about her and her life and her books, then please stay tuned for that. Turn your notifications on so that you don't miss it. But I'm going to be doing a deep dive into her work. Thanks to the Book Jenny's Patreon group for voting on her as my next author spotlight author. And I cannot wait to share all about her with you. And I often get questions about where to start with certain authors. So that is what I'm going to give you right now. Which book or books I recommend you start with for each of the authors I talked about today. First up is Barbara Pym. And I recommend you start with either the book I started with, which was Jane and Prudence, or Excellent Women. Now, Excellent Women is a little bit outside of Barbara Pym's normal village life stories that she writes because it is set in London, but it is a really fabulous book. So I think you can't go wrong with either of those. If you do start with Excellent Women, just know that the style and setting of most of her books is actually more provincial than what you'll find in Excellent Women. For E.M. Delafield, of course, you must start with The Diary of a Provincial Lady, the first book in the Diary of a Provincial Lady series. You need to read them all in order so that you can just travel along with the provincial lady throughout her years. And again, she really is a wonderful place to start if you're just getting interested in furrowed middlebrow writers. For Sue Townsend, I think you really can't go wrong with, of course, her Adrian Mole series, and you need to start with The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4, or the other book, the standalone I recommended, which is The Queen and I. Either of those would be wonderful places to start if you want a little humor in your reading. For Mary Stewart, I am going to also recommend the two books I shared with you earlier that I held up, which are The Moon Spinners or 9 Coaches Waiting. Either of those are excellent places to start. I would say any of the first 5 to 10 books that she wrote, any of those would be great places to start. A couple of her later books I think you should save until after you have read a few of her books and gotten them under your belt. But I highly recommend The Moon Spinners and 9 Coaches Waiting. I think they are wonderful examples of her romantic suspense writing style. For Rosamunde Pilcher, I really think you should either start with The Shell Seekers, Coming Home, or Winter Solstice. One of those 3 of her big books is really the best place to start to get a true feeling of what her writing style is like. Now, September is her 4th book that is a big chunkster, but please wait and read that after you have read The Shell Seekers, because it does have a character that overlaps those stories, and you need to see that character's development first in The Shell Seekers and then in September. For Marcia Willett, I highly recommend, again, her Chadwick family series, starting with Looking Forward, as a wonderful introduction to her. If you don't start there, then I also recommend the very first Marcia Willett book that I ever read, which was A Week in Winter. It makes a wonderful winter read if you're looking for something seasonal for that time of year, but you can't go wrong with either of those, again, if you're looking for something very similar in style and tone to Rosamunde Pilcher. And of course, again, like with E.M. Delafield, for Elizabeth Jane Howard, you need to read the first book in the Cazalet Chronicles first, which is The Light Years, and then continue on with the series in order. It definitely needs to be read that way so that you can follow the family's stories through the time that you spend with them. And of course, finally, we are going to wrap up with D.E. Stevenson, and the 3 books that I continually recommend to people as great places to start for her are Miss Bunkle's book, of course, which was the first book of hers that I read, Mrs. Tim of the Regiment, which is another fabulous place to start, or Victoria Cottage, which is one of my very favorite books of hers. Now, there are so many other books of hers that I could recommend and will recommend in my upcoming author spotlight video. So if you want even more about D.E. Stevenson and which of her books I love, stay tuned for that. And this will wrap up this look at some of my favorite British women writers from the 20th and even into a little bit of the 21st century. Marcia Willett was still writing in the 2000s. And I hope you enjoyed getting to see this list of women writers who have just become like friends to me. And I would love to know what writers, women in particular, if they're British, fabulous. And I'm using British here as to include the entire United Kingdom. So D.E. Stevenson is Scottish. Mary Stewart was also Scottish. So we have both English and Scottish. I don't have any Irish representation, I don't think, in this list. But yes, so that is my caveat for the term British in this video. Apologies if you're Scottish. I didn't mean to not include the fact that some of these authors are Scottish as well. But yes, let's talk all things British women writers down in the comments below. Please share your favorite British women writers. Please share any of the books that I talked about today or authors I talked about today that you're interested in reading or that you also love. Let's talk all things British women down in the comments below. If you're here but you don't have anything you'd like to add in the comments, but you'd like to let me know that you were here, why don't you leave a writing emoji of some sort, since we're talking about writers today. Paper, pen, pencil and paper, a notebook, anything related to writing. Leave those. I love seeing them and knowing you were here, and those comments really do help my channel. As do likes if you enjoyed this video, and hypes if you're on the YouTube mobile app. Those both help my videos and I so appreciate it. And if you're a new viewer and you haven't yet subscribed, I would love to have you subscribe and join my cozy bookish community. Thank you all so much for being here and taking time out of your day to spend it with me. As always, I'll be back with another video very soon, and until then, I wish you a good book and a warm cuppa. Bye!